Okay, so continuing with the social psych review, again, 8 to 10% of the test. This is part 3, which is the final part. We're going to focus on social relations right now, and as part of that, we're going to look at prejudice. So remember, stereotypes are the labels. It's a generalized label. Prejudice would be the unjustified and usually negative thought or attitude toward a group and its members. And then discrimination is the action, which is typically rooted in prejudice. Okay? When we look at all of these different things in terms of why prejudice exists, there are the social roots of prejudice, which would be like social inequalities, the have and the have-nots. There's the us versus them type of mentality, which we'll look at with in-group and out-group. And then there are emotional roots of prejudice as well, which is where scapegoat theory ties in. And then there are cognitive roots also, and that's kind of hinges on categorization, and under categorization would be the outgroup homogeneity effect and even the other race effect. And then vivid cases, which are things that stand out in our mind, and this is where the availability heuristic would come in, even though I don't think I have it listed here. And then the third thing that would be a cognitive root would be the whole like just world, like the belief that the world's a just place. And under that, hindsight bias can fit as well. So just kind of thinking through those in terms of a more organized way as we talk about prejudice. Okay. So ethnocentrism is the belief that one's culture is superior to others. It's a more specific kind of prejudice. So if we looked at like America, for example, and we're like, well, America's superior to everybody, and we kind of look down on other countries as part of that, that would be an example of ethnocentrism. But the same could be true if we looked at one race as being more superior to another race. The scapegoat theory is the theory that prejudice offers an outlet for our anger because it gives us someone to blame for our problems. So even if you think of something on a basic level, like how many times have you blamed like a younger brother or sister or another sibling or something like that for something that went wrong? You're just kind of looking for a scapegoat. You're looking for someone to blame. In-group and out-group. An in-group is us. It's the people with whom we have a common identity. And then your out-group is them. It's people who are different from your own in-groups. So in-groups can be automatic, like the color of your skin or the language that you speak or the religion that you worship or something like that. And by default, your out-groups would be everything that's not part of your in-group. In-group bias, then, is the tendency to favor our own group. It can be somewhat natural. So in class, I think we probably talked about like cell phones. If I gave students a ton of reasons why cell phones in school are a bad idea, and then everybody had an equal vote, even if students were like, yeah, cell phones are a bad idea, they wouldn't vote against their own right to have that cell phone. So think about that on a much broader scale in our society. It's just the natural tendency to favor your own group or favor policies that help out your own group. Outgroup homogeneity effect is the tendency to think that all of our in-groups are really diverse, while members of out-groups are all the same. So sometimes we can use gender here. Obviously, it's not a clear breakdown, but if we look at it and we're like, well, I know the stereotypes about girls. They're emotional and dramatic and weak and caring and motherly and all of those things. And they're also dramatic, right? They're all that stuff. But you're like, but girls are so different. I'm not all those things, and my friends aren't all those things. But all guys are total jerks, and they're conceited, and they're, you know, over masculine and all of that stuff. So that would be the outgroup homogeneity effect. The other race effect just talks about how we have greater recognition of our own race. So the ability to kind of like differentiate features within your own race, but not between races. And then the just world phenomenon is also known as the just world effect or belief in a just world. And it is exactly what it says it is. It's the tendency for us to believe that the world is a fair and just place. Therefore, people get what they deserve in life. Unfortunately, we know that that's not necessarily true, but you can see how that would fuel prejudice or skew your thinking, even as it relates to maybe like homelessness or something like that. Or if you look at immigration and you look at legality status and you're like, well, you're illegal, so here's what you deserve. So that whole just world phenomenon can kind of fuel that prejudice and skew our thinking a bit. Muzafer Sharif did the Robbers Cave study where that demonstrated in-group bias. He was also looking at, remember, that was like trying to bring the boys together, and they got really competitive and started kind of destroying each other a bit. What he learned in the long run when he was trying to figure out how to how to fix, not necessarily prejudice, but sort of like the competition that created prejudice and discrimination. He talked about superordinate goals. So having a goal where groups must work together to achieve it, and achieving that goal would benefit everybody. So what they found is that just putting diverse groups of people together really doesn't do anything to decrease prejudice, but instead that superordinate goal would be the key. All right, continuing with this, we're going to look at aggression. Remember that aggression breaks down in a variety of different ways as well. So we have biological influences, and then we have psychological influences, and then we have kind of like the behavioral or the learned. So aggression is any physical or verbal behavior intended to hurt or destroy. I've listed instrumental versus hostile there. And the biological influences for aggression would be like genetics. For example, we know that we can breed certain animals like dogs to be more aggressive. We know that there are neural influences, like if we stimulate the amygdala, or if there's diminished activity in the frontal lobes. And then also biochemical influences. So like testosterone is associated with physical aggression, or even like alcohol and how that changes the brain, that can be associated with aggression as well. Some psychological influences would be like violence in the media or movies, TV, video games, possibly even learned violence at home or modeling. So think like Bandura Bobo doll experiment. So those are some of the psychological influences. The frustration aggression principle says that when an attempt to achieve a goal is blocked, frustration is created. And when we become frustrated, we tend to then get angry, which can stimulate or cause aggression in us. Again, catharsis could tie in here. We looked at that with emotion. Some people thought for a while that if we just let it out when we got angry, that cathartic experience of letting it out would actually decrease aggression, but that turned out not to be correct. Next, we move into the psychology of attraction. Remember, attraction is like how we bring people together and then how they stay together. So the key factor is proximity. It just means like geographical nearness. So here at our high school, you're more likely to date people that go to this high school. And it is one of the most powerful predictors. It helps create the mere exposure effect. Remember that says that the more that you're exposed to something, the more you come to like it. We also know that physical attractiveness ties in as well. Studies show that our first impressions of people are based on their level of physical attractiveness. Obviously, there are lots of cultural differences in what is deemed attractive, but we know that men tend to be attracted to youthful women, and women are attracted to more mature or dominant or affluent men. Those are just some of kind of the evolutionary explanations. But keep in mind that when we talk about beauty, it's both objective and subjective. The third thing then would be similarity. We tend to be attracted to people who are similar to us in our beliefs, attitudes, interests, attractiveness level. We call that the matching hypothesis. Opposites do not attract. Or you have to finish the statements, opposites attract, then combust. And then the fourth thing is just called reciprocal liking. And it just says we like to be liked. So we like other people who like us. So from that attraction point then, we move into love and how we explain love. Remember, we could talk about Robert Sternberg or Elaine Hatfield. Elaine Hatfield said that there are two types of love. Passionate love, which is sort of like that intense, physical, oftentimes some level of sexual aroused state where you're just absolutely absorbed in another person. We usually see that at the beginning of a relationship. We know that that rises very quickly and then sort of like levels out like we talked about in class. But companionate love is that deep, affectionate attachment that we feel for other people. And we know that it involves self-disclosure, which is the ability to reveal like intimate, honest things about ourselves, and equity. So just feeling like you're receiving as much from the relationship as you're putting into it. So we know that companionate love scores aren't as flashy as passionate love. They rise more slowly but steadily throughout the duration of your relationship. So it's really important to build that strong companionate basis. Robert Sternberg's is relatively similar, but he includes commitment. So he says that if you think of a triangle, the tips of the triangle are intimacy, passion, and commitment. And you need all three of those things in order to actually have the love that we're talking about, which he calls consummate love. Our last area then is altruism and helping. Remember, altruism would be a total unselfish regard for the welfare of others. So helping people out even if it's at a cost to yourself. There are a couple things that play in here. in terms of whether or not we'll help others. So the social exchange theory basically says that the goal of any social behavior is to maximize benefits and minimize costs. So that means that we would be more likely to help out if it wasn't of a great cost to us. The social responsibility norm says that we're more likely to help those people that society has deemed in need. So like children or the elderly, or sometimes even women would count in there as well. The reciprocity norm just says that kind of in life we learn that we should help not harm other people, and that hopefully then someday they'll help us. So those are just some of the general terms. But the case of Kitty Genovese, who's the woman who was attacked and the attacker ran away and then came back because nobody called the police, that's been studied several times to try to really kind of break down the factors that increase the likelihood that we would get help. The first thing is the bystander effect. That's the tendency for a person to be less likely to give help in an emergency situation if there are other people's around. So basically, the greater number of the people around, the less likely that you are to get help. The main reason for the bystander effect is known as diffusion of responsibility. We assume that someone else will help. We also know that pluralistic ignorance plays in. People look to others to decide what's appropriate in a given situation. So if we're looking around and nobody's really helping out, or everybody's videotaping and that's all they're doing or something like that, then we're likely to kind of go along with that and do the same things, okay? Factors that are important to get help. Number one, people have to notice. Number two, they have to interpret it as an emergency. And number three, they have to assume responsibility for helping. Okay? We are more likely to help if we're not in a hurry and if we're in a good mood. Also, if we've seen someone else being helpful, or if we feel the victim deserves help, or if we feel the victim is somehow similar to us.